Flag out in front of our building. It looks like they just did it.
They did.
It's 22 degrees outside, and I don't know about you, but it actually feels like it's about 50 compared to where we were over the last couple of
By comparison, I would have to agree.
Yeah.
Did feel a little bit more
It's
warm
nice
today.
Things are warming up.
I'll tell you, and there's nothing warming up at the White House
No.
except for maybe their surprise that their former Secretary of Defense, who was lauded by all sides. This is the problem when Bob Gates wrote his book. People who have said this guy is the perfect person at the right time to take over for Donald Rumsfeld and bring peace and tranquility between the State Department and Defense Department of the Bush administration, to bring peace and some stability as President Obama, at 48 years old, takes over the White House, a major job. He needs somebody with some experience, like then 68-year-old Secretary Gates. So when he writes this book, evidently the story is the White House caught blindsided. One person in the White House, according to the Daily Mail of London, is reading the book now and summarizing it for everybody else. Jay Carney also got a copy.
Yeah, he certainly did. And now they're on full court press, essentially defending Biden. Yesterday, pictures
Why
of the White House.
Biden, though? Out of everybody, why defend Joe Biden?
You know, maybe there are theories out there. I won't go into mine. But I do believe that yesterday the New York Times had an article saying that this was the first time that the lunch between the president and the vice president was photographed. White House made sure that was out there. Also,
First time in 5 years.
Yeah, right.
And Jay Carney said
within this administration.
A complete coincidence with the book coming out.
They were talking about this lunch photo for maybe 5 years. We don't know.
Yeah.
It's been in the books as far as they know for scheduling. But they put on a full court press when it came to defending Biden. Take a listen.
He's played a key role in every major national security and foreign policy debate and policy discussion in this administration, in this White House. He played important roles, obviously, in the policy discussions and carrying out of the policy decisions that the president made with regards to Iraq, and in the policy deliberations over Afghanistan.
Okay, so there you have Jay Carney, who, interestingly enough, yesterday opened his briefing by walking out and saying, hey, you read any good books lately? And that's the photo spray that you see there in the private dining room where the president and Joe Biden, first time photographed having lunch together in 5 years. Complete coincidence to the fact that the Gates book came out yesterday. The reason they're pushing back so hard is that in the Gates book, Mr. Gates writes that Joe Biden has been wrong on nearly every major policy and national security issue for 40 years.
For how long?
40 years, pretty much his entire time in public service. Brit Hume last night on Special Report reviewed the vice president's tenure and says, you know what? There's something to that.
For all the good in the man, and there's a lot of good in Joe Biden, he really was wrong about a lot of things. Go back to the 1980s. He was wrong about he wanted to keep the Pershing and cruise missiles out of Europe to support the nuclear freeze. When the first Gulf War came along, he was opposed to that war and voted against it. When the second Gulf War came along, the second Iraq War came along, he voted for that. When the surge came along, he was against that. The list goes on up into this administration. When the president was about to send the troops on the raid to kill bin Laden, he was opposed to that. So it's striking that they would defend him so vigorously when he has, clearly been wrong so very often.
When Dan Quayle was ripped consistently during his Bush years with Bush 41, there was no massive defense of Dan Quayle's credibility. When Dick Cheney was vilified as Darth Vader, there was no massive defense of his credibility. It seems the administration had everything in this book that is 600 pages, and they talk about the President Obama's decisions from Libya to Afghanistan to a pullout in Iraq. Why are you saying, wow, we got to make sure that Joe Biden's rehabable? Really, Joe, are you choosing the next president or the nominee?
Or are they choosing how the legacy will be portrayed in years to come?
Sure.
Someone that maybe would be vocal in defense of the president after he is out of the White House. Right. As the new president or not, if he were to join in an election.
Right now, the conventional wisdom, well, it's Hillary. Hillary's going to run. But what if Hillary doesn't run? Well, one thing yesterday Jay Carney could not answer was the last time that the president spoke to President Karzai of Afghanistan. Remember, in the book, it said that the president ordered troops to Afghanistan despite believing that the mission would work out. Also, Mr. Gates said that the president simply could not stand Karzai. Here's a quote from the book. The president doesn't believe in his own strategy and doesn't consider the war to be his. For him, it's all about getting out. Yesterday, Jay Carney was asked about Karzai. It's a rather lengthy exchange betwixt Jay Carney and Ed Henry, but it's worth it. Listen to this.
You stressed the president's commitment to the mission in Afghanistan, given the book. Senators Graham and McCain just came back from Afghanistan. They spoke to President Karzai, and they claim that President Obama has not spoken to President Karzai since June or July. How is it that the two leaders, if he's committed to the mission, how could the two leaders, as you're negotiating a status of forces agreement, how could the two leaders not talk in months?
When did we go to South Africa?
December.
Well, I was physically in the presence of both presidents when President Karzai and President Obama exchanged greetings. So
Agreed.
I think
they had a substantive discussion about the status.
Look, the President and President Karzai have had discussions in the past. There's not a lot of mystery about our views on this document that was negotiated in good faith and the need to sign it on the part of the Afghan government. So we have a robust and constant communication with the Afghan government, both from Washington and from our embassy in Kabul, as well as through our military commanders.
When was the last time the president spoke to the lead U.S. commander in Afghanistan?
I'll have to take the question.
You didn't. We're in a war
that.
footing right now, and you don't know the last time you spoke to the commanding general?
I'll have to take the question.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is why the Gates book is so.
questions.
This is why the Gates book is so devastating, because in Iraq, everyone questioned, how did we lose the status of forces agreement? Why wasn't anyone talking? President Obama's first call to al-Maliki the year we left was to say we're leaving. Joe Biden was supposed to handle it. It was September before we left in November, and now we're seeing the same pattern in Afghanistan. Oh, and the war was supposed to be the good war. We find out, according to the Secretary of Defense, the president never believed in the strategy, never really felt like he boxed himself in after running on that being the good war. So you factor all these things together, we're about to see possibly an announcement saying we'd like to have stayed in Afghanistan and worked it out and made sure all the blood and all the money that we spent on that country does not get turned over to the Taliban, but we couldn't work out agreement with their crazy president.
Keyword, their blood. You know, lives are at stake here. There's been pressure on their government right now to get this bilateral security agreement done. Jay Carney said it just days ago that this needs to be sped up. This is something that should happen. To have the communication again, almost in a way that seems chronic, right, as depicted from the Gates book, to not have that communication in place seems so disturbing to those in the military, I would guess, and their families, determining whether 15,000 troops would remain.
There's something about a president talking to a president that no Susan Rice or Senator McCain, all due respect to both those individuals, can't get done what the president can get done when he calls directly to another president.
He wants out, but it looks like he's already checked out.
So don't dupe us. Come out and say what you think. Don't play the game.
Book comes out next week.
Meanwhile, at 9